Fable, one of the best Western RPGs and most innovative game for its time. Before we get into this video, if you guys enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and a sub, and if this video does well, I'll make sure to get the next Fable video out as soon as possible so we can get it right into the second game, which is personally my favorite game. But let's get right into this. In this review / retrospective, we're going to go into the story, the gameplay, and many other aspects of Fable. But the first thing I want to start with is the history of the company and who actually worked on the game. Lionhead Studios was the creator of Fable. The original game that they made before this was Black and White, which was like an RTS style game. I used to watch videos on it. It's a really bizarre game, and it's worth a check out if you're even interested in it. You play with gods and stuff like that. But Fable was like their second project that they ended up working on, and it's probably one of their best that they ever got to make before they were sadly shut down years later. Fable was a very innovative and exciting RPG for its time. Even Peter Molyneux said it was like a game that would revolutionize the RPG market, which it did at the time. One of the most innovative aspects of Fable that really set it apart from every other RPG for the time was definitely its morality system. It was really interesting being able to decide if you wanted to be the good holy person where you go and help people or do donations, whatever it may be. Or you could go around wreaking havoc in villages, killing anyone that you want, and end up getting like the evil ending, which is really fun, and I'm really happy that this game was able to innovate in this way for its time, and it really plays a huge role in a lot of other RPGs nowadays. One of the more interesting things about Fable when it first came out is it was supposed to be kind of lifelike, where you could be able to plant an acorn and it would actually grow throughout time like playing through the game, which really sounded interesting. This is what Peter Molyneux said, and it ended up becoming a gag because it wasn't possible at the time, but it's really interesting how many different details and stuff were supposed to be thrown into this game and get tested out. Sadly, a lot of them didn't end up coming to fruition, but at least the game still came out great. But let's actually get into the game now.
Deep in the forest of Albion lay the small town of Oakvale, unchanged by time and untouched by the sword. Here lived a boy and his family, a boy dreaming of greatness, of one day being a hero. Sometimes he imagined himself as a noble knight or a powerful wizard. And other times he dreamt he'd be an evil warrior. But in all his dreams of greatness, he could not possibly imagine the power of the destiny that lay before him.
Fable 1 starts you as a child, and you live in Oakvale Village. The way that this works is it pretty much teaches you the ropes as a kid. So you start out talking to your father, and he gives you a quest to go help and get your sister a birthday present because you forgot to get her a present for her birthday. So pretty much what you're either doing is going around doing good deeds, and your father will give you a coin each time you do a good deed, or you can run around and do the most terrible things. I decided to do an evil side of the campaign this time around because usually I do the good side, and it's honestly really entertaining being able to choose which one you want to be. Like in this one, I helped this partner cheat on their other partner, and I also beat up a little kid for his teddy bear, and I broke stock because this one kid told me that I wouldn't do it. So it's honestly interesting how like drastically different what outcomes you can get because you decided to go with one thing over the other. After you end up doing 3 quests, you end up getting enough money to go buy your sister some chocolate for her birthday. Once you purchase it, you end up finding her out in the fields, and you give her the chocolate. After you give it to her, you actually find out that she has had dreams of this happening before, and there was also another part of the dream. Once you end up walking out of the field, you end up finding out what the other part of the dream was, and that was the village getting attacked. Once the village gets attacked, a lot of people end up dying. Even your father ends up dying, sadly. But right when you're about to die to another bandit that is going through the village, you end up getting saved by the guy named Maze. Maze ends up saving you, and he ends up bringing you to the Heroes Guild, where pretty much your story begins. Once you get to the Heroes Guild, this is where kind of your combat tutorial starts to begin. So pretty much what happens is once you get there, you meet a character named Whisper, and you're both going through like the trials of trying to become a hero. So throughout this, they end up teaching you how to do spells, how to use your different types of melee weapons, and even how to be an archer. It's honestly pretty good, and it's a decent way of giving an introduction to it without like being too aggressive right off the bat, because the game does have decent challenge later on, so it's a good introduction for people that are new to the genre, at least in my opinion. Once you actually start playing throughout it, it's honestly great. There's a lot of different quests that are right off the bat, and throughout doing the quests and stuff at the beginning, you end up aging until you hit 18 years old. But let's talk about some of the quests before we get into it. The quests that are in the game, at least at the beginning, are somewhat generic, but they end up picking up pace over time. Like some person asks you for apples, you go and grab them apples and bring them back. Something simple like that. It's a fetch quest. Or you have to race this guy and see if you're a faster hero. And like other things like can you beat Whisper in combat and get an A+, we'll give you a different weapon, stuff like that. It's honestly really cool. And they also have some evil stuff like shooting birds. If you want to end up getting that done, you also get a good amount of currency for doing so. And it pretty much shows you like the morality, like helping the girl with apples gives you some goodwill, but you know, shooting the birds ends up giving you evil, which is awesome because it pretty much tells you that certain quests are for good side and certain quests are for the bad side. So depending on, you might not want to do one thing over the other, but one might be a lot more enticing just because of the value that you get from it, which is an interesting way of doing it, at least in my opinion. But once you come to the right age, you end up fighting Maze for your last quest for like the Hero Guild to see if you're actually ready to, you know, venture off. And after you beat Maze, you end up going and saving people at this picnic first. That is your first ever quest in the game, where you have to go kill a mighty bee or whatever you want to call it. It's honestly interesting. It's a really fun fight, and it honestly shows you the first little challenge that you're going to be getting throughout the game. After you end up killing the wasp, you end up getting this renown system. This renown system ends up playing a huge role. Like it ends up giving it like you different types of quests because you have enough renown around the area, and also unlocks different areas to go into, which is a really interesting idea, and I really like the way it's set up. So it's pretty much just saying you are worthy enough to go and do this type of quest, which is really cool, and I'm happy that they have this aspect in the game. So like if you're doing like these basic quests, like they actually have some type of purpose, which I really like. But once you end up getting some of that, there's another thing that you collect throughout the game, which is experience. Experience is pretty much just what every other game has, which is a leveling system, but they do it in a different way, at least it seems. So pretty much with this one, depending on which weapon you're using is what type of experience you get, so that's what you'll be able to level, which I really like. They have a little bit of the middle ground, this green experience, which can go towards anything, even if you haven't been using that certain type of weapon, which I really like. But let's talk about the skill tree. The physical skill tree is kind of basic, so was the archery, but the will is honestly amazing. They went into detail for the spells really well in this game. Like compared to the second and third game, this is the most innovative they've been with like spells, which is kind of sad because it is the first game, but literally there are so many different varieties of spells. Some are a bit useless, but then the other ones are completely unique and you've never seen in a different game, which I really enjoy. The next quest that you end up doing is with Whisper, and pretty much you guys are going to be fighting Hobbs together, and whoever wins ends up getting the trophy. One of the interesting things that they decided to add is the boasting system. So pretty much if you feel like you can do a bit more of a challenge, you can boast and wager 100 to who knows how much money, depending on, and pretty much to get a bigger reward if you are able to do so. So let's say like they tell you to not wear any armor. If you're able to do that, you are given more money than what you were expecting to get. Same thing, like if you feel like you can get more kills than Whisper, they will give you more money for that. Or if you feel like you can do it within a certain time limit, stuff like that. It's really interesting, and I wish that they would have brought this back in like the later games, but this feature is completely gone in like the later games, which really sucks because it's an interesting idea, and it's honestly adds a little bit more replayability to the game. If you want a little bit more of a challenge the next time you play through, at least you get to decide on that, which is really fun. But after you're done whooping the shit out of a whole bunch of hobs with Whisper, you can kind of decide if you want to continue the main quest or split off and go do a whole bunch of branching quests. There is honestly a lot of unique side missions, and I would highly recommend, if it's your first time playing through, to go check out a lot of them, because they are honestly the most unique thing that I've ever seen. Like, most games do not light a candle near to what this game has for like variety when it comes to side quests. Like, you'll have one side quest where you have to go find buried treasure for this wife that lost her husband, or trying to dress up to impress a woman that isn't even real, which is really fun. And it's really unique on most of these like side quests, and honestly, they're highly enjoyable. They give you good rewards and stuff too, so they're worth checking out. But let's get back onto the main quest. The main quest ends up bringing you to merchants that have to get to Oakvale, and Oakvale is where you're originally from, so your character ends up having a little bit of PTSD after you're able to traverse it like through the forest with these people. But once you get to Oakvale, you end up meeting up with Maze again, and he tells you that your sister is alive. So there's at least some good news here. So what you're pretty much supposed to do is go and fight Twinblade, which is the person that captured your sister. Sadly, with these types of enemies, or even just characters in general, there's a lot of characters that you meet that honestly don't play all too big of a role throughout the story, which really sucks because there's so many of them. And it's hard to keep up with like names just because they only have like 10, maybe 15 words said throughout the whole game, which really sucks, but it's honestly makes sense because most of these characters aren't all too important to the plot. So Twinblade, you'll meet him for maybe like 5 minutes and then you'll completely forget about him for the rest of the game. But at least this is like where you can kind of see the level cap here. So pretty much when you're going to fight Twinblade, this is either going to be a very challenging fight for you, or it could be an easy breeze depending on how you actually been playing the game. Like if you went and did some side quests, or are you just rushing through the story? If you're doing both, this is a very challenging mission. Like personally, I did the one where you couldn't attack anyone, so I had to somehow sneak into the base without getting caught. I did a weird cheese where you run around a tree and they lose aggro on you, and I ran through the gate. And then pretty much what you have to do then is just keep collecting items. So I collected this outfit to go through the next gate, and then you have to do a gamble game or something else to gain access key to get to him. And then once you do that, you have to get like bounty hunters to get or assassins to get them away from the door, and then pretty much wreak havoc. And after you do all this, it's honestly kind of tedious and very long of a stretch. It's at least interesting, at least. There's like different decisions that you get to make throughout it, so it's not like you're just walking around doing nothing. Like you get to decide how you want to get these gates and stuff open for your character, which is somewhat fun. But after you get all of them open, you end up fighting Twinblade, and you actually find your sister is right behind him, pretty much his right-hand man, I guess you could say. She is now blind because her eyes were taken out, but she can actually see the visions, and he's been using her to pretty much see what is going to be happening in the future. But you end up fighting him and defeating him. And this is where one of the morality things come in. Do you want to kill Twinblade, or do you want to keep him alive? It's really up to you what you decide. Personally, I ended up killing him. I feel like this shouldn't be an evil consequence, but it is in the game sense because they want it to be. But if you end up sparing him, he, gives you good points, and that's pretty much all you get from this. You can run around his camp. There's a couple chests there too, so there's some decent loot around him. But if you kill him or if you keep him alive, there's honestly barely any type of difference, which is kind of disappointing because you would expect these to have like major outcomes, but you'll notice with Fable 1, at least it doesn't seem like the outcomes are all too drastic until you play the DLC. So after you're done beating the hell out of the Twinblade and the rest of his army, you end up heading back to the Heroes Guild, and then you get a new quest from Maze. Maze asks you to go to Witchwood to find an archaeologist that is pretty much lost. And this is where one of the most interesting aspects and probably one of my favorite things that they add in each and every game comes into play. There's something called a demon door, and demon doors are honestly really unique to each and every Fable game. Pretty much a demon door is a door that you end up talking to, and it has a challenge for you to do to actually get inside. And all these like challenges vary depending on what they actually want. Like the door that you need to open to find the archaeologist wants you to spell his name with like these stones that you find, which I'm an absolute professional at doing so.
Try to get your combat multiplier even higher.
H D S I H D S H I D S H I D.
So after you're done messing with the pillars and get the door finally open, you end up heading in and find out the archaeologist actually did not want to be found, and he's very upset with you for actually finding him. He pretty much blames it on you, and he says he has to leave now, and pretty much it kind of ends with like a question of why did Maze send us to go find him then? And pretty much what you do after this is you have to go to this one village and pretty much save it from Balverines. The Balverines are pretty challenging, but you have to kill the white Balverine to actually save the village, which is somewhat fun. But after you're done with that, this is where the next like main highlight of the story comes in. After you're done saving the village, they end up giving you a key to go to the arena, pretty much like a pass to go inside and actually fight in the games. This is one of the more entertaining, but also one of the most frustrating parts of the game come into play. So pretty much what you have to do is head in and pretty much win the game in the arena. And you get to meet a whole bunch of different heroes that actually have played in the games. You also find out that your mother was part of these games and she won before as well. And this is where you meet one of the other characters that play a huge role throughout the game, is Jack of Blades. This guy's more of a mysterious type, doesn't really give you that much information on who he is and pretty much what his purpose is throughout the game, until like later on you actually find out who he is and like more about him. It's honestly one of the more entertaining spots, but like I said, it can be very frustrating depending on like how greedy you are. So you pretty much have to fight through like 9 games of like in the arena and kill a whole bunch of enemies. But if you want to get a lot of gold, you have to stay in and keep playing the game. But if you feel like you're going to die, you have to step out and, you know, come back in once you get your potions and stuff. Now the issue I have is I was too greedy, so I died 3 different times throughout this, just trying to collect loot. And one thing that's different from this one and the other ones, this is the only game that you can actually die and have to restart. In the other 2, if you die, you just come back to life no matter what. You lose some experience, but with this game, if you're dead, you're dead. Unless you have the revive potions, then you are not coming back. So there is one other major thing that happens during this arena fight, is that you end up fighting with Whisper for the last couple rounds, and then you have to decide if you want to kill her or not. This is somewhat important depending on which one you decide to pick. So if you end up deciding to keep her alive for the good ending, you get to keep your gold upon death. But if you end up killing her, you'll lose all your gold upon death. So you pretty much have to decide that. But aside from that, it doesn't really play that major of a role. It changes some dialogue, like with Thunder. Thunder is more upset with you because you killed his sister, but he'll also be upset with you for beating her in the arena. So it's kind of like a whatever. You just have to decide which one you think is more important. Like if you end up keeping her alive, she doesn't come back in the later of the game. She ends up going back to her homeland. So it really does not matter. Like the implication is that she ends up leaving no matter what. So killing her, personally, I just did it because I don't care. I wanted the money, and plus, you know, she wasn't a nice person to your character, so I didn't really feel all too bad for killing her. Around this time, you'll now notice that your character is starting to look like they're aging, and this happens with every type of experience points that are spent. Your character will age each and every time you spend some, which is kind of an interesting way of doing it. I wish more games would do it this way, but if you don't like the character being like this old, you can go to the Temple of Avo, which will be found in Witchwood, and if you donate enough money, you will actually de-age a little bit, which is an awesome way of dealing with it. It's pretty expensive, so we'll go into like some cheese cheese stuff if you really are interested on this. There is a lot of bugs in this game, and I mean like crazy ones. Like for like currency wise, once you can get to North Bowerstone, which you will be able to get to after you finish this quest, you will meet Lady Grey, and Lady Grey is interested in you and not really into Thunder anymore. So if once you talk to her, she'll actually let you go to North Bowerstone, and when you get there, there's like some crazy cheese glitches with like the trading system, which I'll show on screen right now. And there's also like things like where you can get to find a weapon in the game literally before you even get to the ending. It's kind of insane, but you know, this is the type of glitches that you'll find throughout the game. And sometimes it's beneficial to do them because honestly, the grind in this game is somewhat insane, mostly when it comes to experience points. Even with like 300 to 400,000 experience points, you are still not going to be done with using your spells, like the upgrades for that area, which is kind of insane at that point because, you know, that's thousands of hours worth of time. Not really, I'm over exaggerating, but it still is a long amount of time to be spending in this game, mostly after like all quests are done and all that. But if you really want to keep grinding it normally, you don't have to follow these. Well, while we're on the conversation of Lady Grey, there's also another aspect to this game, and that is the relationship system. So pretty much if a character loves you enough, you can either get married or do whatever you want to do, honestly, with the character, depending on who you're interested in. You can pretty much start a relationship with that character. Personally, I took Lady Grey from Thunder because, you know, I'm on that evil route, so I don't really care about his feelings or anything like that. So you have to do a couple of minor quests, at least for her relationship. So pretty much all you have to do is get her a rose and pretty much find her a necklace and then end up fighting Thunder. This fight with Thunder is honestly pretty easy at this point in time because my character is way over leveled at this point. So pretty much I just like waffle stomped the shit out of him. He didn't really have much of a chance against me. All I really did was use the same spell over and over again, and he pretty much died in 2 seconds. That's another thing you'll notice throughout this game is honestly the boss fights are very boring, it seems, because they're all pretty much really easy, and I don't blame it on the game. Maybe it's just because I'm a little too over level for the areas I'm supposed to be at, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, it really is up to you how much you level your character or like how fast you're leveling it. I did do a little bit of cheese with the powers at least because those ones take a long time to get. But aside from that, I played normally for like the combat and stuff, and I was still able to get to that level where I was still beating him up even without like any type of cheese. But let's get back into the relationships. Honestly, the relationships in this game aren't all too interesting compared to like the second and third one. In the second and third one, you can actually have like children and stuff, and so it actually plays a major role, and those kids can grow up, and even in the third one, you can end up doing quests with the child, which is really fun, and I'm hoping in the newest iteration of the game that we'll be able to play and have children and stuff, and maybe they'll be able to grow to your age, like 18 or something like that, and you can actually use them as like a companion. That'd be awesome. I don't know how complicated it would be to set this up, but I would really enjoy the feature of that. But in this game, it's honestly not all too interesting. It's one of the more side things that you can just kind of do if you want to. So after you're done marrying or deciding whatever fate you want to for Lady Grey, you end up heading to find your sister, and she talks to you about how Jack of Blades actually is the person that captured your mother and actually removed her eyes. After you have that conversation, she tells you to go and find the archaeologist. Once you head back to Bowerstone, you find out that he has been captured by his new mechanical bird type enemies, and you just have to fight through a whole bunch of them until you get to the docks. And once you talk to him, the archaeologist is actually the person that tells you how to get into the prison where your mother is captured. And it's one of the more challenging areas to get to. You fight through a whole bunch of undead in the cemetery, and you fight like hundreds of them at this point. Like there's hundreds in your way. You just keep fighting through them until you get to the end where you actually find your mother. Once you actually get to the mother, you end up having a conversation about how she doesn't want you to be there because he fears that, you know, like worst come to worst, you're not supposed to be there. She doesn't want you to get hurt. And right after you two try to escape, you both end up getting captured. Once this scene happens, one of the interesting aspects of the game happens where pretty much there is a time that you can end up spending in prison. There is a race that you have to do to try to escape, and if you get to the end of the race, you can try to escape, but it only happens once every year. So pretty much after you do the race, there's like a book that you have to open, and depending on which book you open, decides if you're going to escape that year. It took me 2 tries to actually escape, so I ended up having to wait there a whole year for your character until I got to the key in the second book. Once you get it, you end up fighting out of the cells with the inmates that are around you. If you want to let them out, you can actually just leave them in there if you want to. But once you free them or whatever may be, you end up heading back to your mother and you let her go, and you both end up escaping, which leads to another one of those boss fights where you end up fighting like this kraken looking creature. It's kind of cool, but he's a pretty easy boss, just like most of the other ones. After you end up dealing with him, you both escape. So pretty much around this time, you end up finding out that your sister gets captured. Yes, they get captured a lot throughout this game. You end up helping your mother find a portal to get to Hook Coast, is where your sister is at. And pretty much what you do is you fight your way through a whole bunch of enemies at Hook Coast, but right after you find out it is actually a trap. Maze is there, and he ends up being a villain of the story, which was somewhat of a twist, but at the same time, his reasoning around it kind of made no sense. He just said he was scared of Jack of Blades or whatever, but that was pretty much his whole reasoning around doing what he did. And pretty much what you have to do is kill him. And the issue is Jack of Blades now has the key to pretty much take the Sword of Aeons, which is the most powerful sword in the land, I guess, from what they say, even though it's weaker than one of the other swords, but we'll go with it. But because Jack of Blades ended up getting the key, he pretty much made all hell break loose. A whole bunch of enemies start spawning everywhere, same with allies, and everyone's pretty much just fighting to the death. It's honestly a chaotic but fun scene. You have to go through multiple different portals, going to different gateways that you have fought at, and I've explored at least throughout the story, which is really fun. And it pretty much is an absolute shit show. You just keep chasing after him, he keeps taunting you, and it ends up with you guys at the last one where sadly your mother ends up passing, and then it leads to you going back to the Heroes Guild. And this is where the final boss fight goes. Pretty much when you get in there, he isn't that hard of a boss, honestly. He's one of those ones that take like 5 to 10 seconds depending on. If you have like really good abilities by this point in time, he's a really quick boss to fight. He's kind of gimmicky, so you pretty much spend the next like maybe 2 to 3 minutes fighting him, and after you beat him, you get to decide the last decision in the game. And this decision honestly is the biggest one in the game. Either you get to keep the Swords of Aeon, and that means that you have to kill your sister, or you can throw it into the fire and pretty much destroy it. So pretty much some Lord of the Rings type shit going on. But because I was going for an evil playthrough, I ended up keeping it and I murdered the sister. Honestly, the ending of this game was very anticlimactic, at least in my opinion. There wasn't all too much of an interest there. I mean, at least it was the biggest decision that you get to make throughout the game. The sword's not all too great, honestly. Just using the Solaris sword is 10 times better than this one, but we'll go with it. But depending on which one you get, is just whatever one you think is most satisfying. But when you get into the lost books is where like the rest of the plot comes in, and honestly this should have been in the base game because it adds a lot of plot to the game. So pretty much what ends up happening is you head into the DLC, and there's a girl named Briar Rose. You see her a couple times throughout the story in the base game. She's not all too interesting of a character, but once you actually get into the DLC, she plays a lot more of a major role. Once you get into the DLC, you have to open this demon door that will only open to you because you have Jack's mask, so you have to show it to the door, and once you go in, this is where the first morality thing plays in. Morality in the DLC is a lot more important, and it actually has a lot more bigger decisions than what the base game had. And right off the bat, you have to decide if the monks that are inside are worthy of living or dying. It's all up to you. Either if you put sun, they get to survive. If you put the moon, they die. No matter what the outcome is you get the key, but one is eviler than the other. Once you're done wrapping up getting the key, you head back to where you went at the end of the game, and it takes you to the Lost Bay. And once you get to the Lost Bay, you meet another character named Scythe, and he tells you about the situation that's going on with like Jack of Blades coming back and stuff like that, and he's pretty much like the all-knowing, I guess you can go with it. And pretty much you just fight through a whole bunch of enemies throughout the way, and you end up at the Snow Spire village, and this is where they pretty much tell you what your final quest is, and that's to defeat Jack of Blades again. And this is where another one of the morality things play into it. You cannot fight him until you gather 3 hero souls. And this is one of the more interesting decisions throughout the game. Honestly, this is my personal favorite decisions that you get to make. So pretty much what you get to decide is if you want to get the souls from the living or the dead. If you pick living, like when you go and meet with Thunder, you have to either kill Thunder or go kill an undead warrior that is in the arena. Personally, like I said, I'm going for the evil ending, so I kill Thunder and I take his soul. After you take his, you head back and you talk to Briar, and she's like, okay, we need 2 more souls. One was your mother's, or you can kill me. And she says, don't kill her. But of course, I ended up murdering her, and I took her soul and put it in. The evil ending, honestly, is the fastest route, but I ended up killing her, taking it, and I headed off to the last one, which will be the Guildmaster, or you can go kill a different one and capture that soul. The kill on the Guildmaster is absolutely fucking insane.
For all of us, please, let me teleport you to the graveyard. Take Nostro's soul instead. Very well, hero. Do your worst. I am no defenseless old man. I have powers that you can't begin to...
The way you like beat him up at the end was the most entertaining thing, but you end up killing him and you take his soul back and you put it in, and it leads to the door opening, and this is where the last decision of the game comes in. This decision honestly is one of the more important ones, actually the most important in the game. Yeah, after you fight Jack of Blades, which is now a dragon for some reason. We'll just go with it. I'm not sure why he's a dragon in this one, but yeah, he ends up becoming a dragon. You end up fighting him, and at the end, you get to decide if you want to keep Jack of Blades' mask or to throw it into the fire. This one is honestly up to you. I ended up keeping it, and once you put it on, you can never take it off. So that's like the one defect. You can't wear helmets anymore or anything like that. But if you throw it into the fire, it's destroyed. So you know which one's the good one and the evil one. So pretty much Jack of Blades comes back if you put it back on, and if you throw it into the fire, he's gone forever. The real canon ending is Jack of Blade getting destroyed and you never taking the sword. You destroying the sword is the base ending, because Fable 2 leads with your sister being like the leading protagonist that tells the main character where to go throughout the second one, and same with the third one. Which kind of sucks, because at the end of all of this, you actually find out that your decisions didn't really matter, because one's pretty much a folktale and one's like the true ending, which the hero ending is truly the ending in each and every game, which kind of sucks, because then what was the point of having a morality system if it never really truly changes anything? At least that's how I feel, in my opinion. But overall, this is still one of my favorite RPGs I've ever played. It is so entertaining. It has some of the best side quests I've ever played, some of the best combat I ever played through as well, and one of the more interesting stories, even though the morality isn't as exciting as you would think it is. Like, don't get me wrong, certain things do play a huge role, but some of them just kind of fall flat. The only other issue I ever really had, like I said, was the bosses. They weren't all too interesting or exciting, and it doesn't really get better from here. I'm not gonna lie with you, Fable 2 didn't do all too well on bosses, and neither did 3. I think 3 had the most enticing or interesting storytelling bosses, but it still had some of the worst bosses I've seen in video games, but that's completely fine as long as the plot is fine and the combat and the story can keep you enticed the whole time is all that really matters to me, and this game does that perfectly, at least in my opinion. The only other positives I really want to throw in at the end is honestly the soundtrack of the whole game is really entertaining. It has a lot more whimsy or cheery type music, but also the creepy stuff that's thrown into the side depending on what locations you're on. honestly some of the best music I've ever heard in a video game. It's one of my personal favorites, and I could go back and listen to it at any point in time. Mostly like the introduction music, like in Fable 2 or in Fable 1. It just sounds awesome, and every time I hear it is like a nostalgia hit each and every time. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and a sub. And if you guys have suggestions for anything else to check out, leave them down in the comments down below. But yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I really do want to get into talking about the second game. Either we're going to push that back a little bit, but if this video does well, we'll probably get into the second one first. But I was thinking of either doing that or Brutal Legends. If you guys would rather see one over the other, just let me know in the comments down below. But I'll see y'all next time. See ya.